Steelers Nation, Steelers Country, Steelers Worldwide, as Mike says. I'm JY. This is Michael Nicastro, and we are back with another week of Steelers talk, Steelers football, with a special insider guest. Sammy, let's get to it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy.
Harris Smith shields. Flacco Polamalu takes it home. Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh might be bound for that thanks to number 43.
The sickest Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
Jordan, first of all, I want to show you some love, man. You predicted a 3-point Chiefs Super Bowl win, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I posted on Facebook when the NFL asked. I said Mahomes MVP, and 3-point victory by the Chiefs, and then I went to bed.
Yeah, I didn't do so hot. I had Eagles and Miles Sanders winning MVP. I think he had like -2 yards and 2 fumbles, so I should go ahead and delete that tweet. Anyway, a guy obviously that is quite popular on Twitter. He is honestly one of the most esteemed Pittsburgh sports writers of our generation. Steelers beat writer, editor over at Pittsburgh Sports Now. You can also catch him on WPXI's Final Word. We're very excited to welcome in Alan Saunders. Alan, what's up?
That was quite an intro. That was I don't know. I've never been called esteemed of anything before, so appreciate that.
We got to butter you up. I mean, I'm not submitting to a polygraph test or anything over here. Alan, I want to dive right into it, man. Obviously, you're around the Steelers all the time. I think my first impression after watching this Super Bowl, or takeaway, I should say, is how the hell does this team ever get to scoring 40 points to keep up with these Joneses, teams like the Chiefs, Bills, and Bengals, of course. So tell me why or why not the Steelers should focus this offseason, both in free agency and the draft, on the offensive side of the ball.
Well, it's interesting because they're bringing their entire offense back, right? I mean, they're not losing anybody from last year's offense. At the same time, I think you have to acknowledge last year's offense wasn't nearly good enough, right? And so, on the other hand, they're losing or are scheduled to hit free agency a lot of guys from the defense. So I think it depends on how you want to approach the different parts of the offseason. If you're looking at plugging holes, the work needs to be done on defense, right? They have 2 of their co-starters at inside linebacker, Cam Sutton, Terrell Edmonds, Larry Ogunjobi. So like 5 sort of key pieces of their defense all set to hit the free agency. Nobody on offense except for Steven Sims is a free agent. Zach Gentry are free agents. But I think when you look at what was a success of the team last year and what was a failure of the team last year and where do they need to upgrade, I think the upgrades need to happen on the offense. So they don't have a lot of cap space. They can make some by restructuring some deals, cutting a couple guys, whatever. I'll be very interested to see how aggressive they are in plugging those holes on the defense in free agency. If they're really, we see like 4 or 5 of those spots all filled in free agency, but I think this could be an offense-heavy draft. But the way they scouted the Senior Bowl didn't really lean that way. They sent Grady Brown and Mike Tomlin and Brian Flores and Denzel Martin. So they had four coaches, all of whom sort of specialize in defense. Mike Tomlin was watching the offensive line a good bit. So that's not telling me they're thinking it's a lot of offense in this draft. So I'm not really sure. I definitely think the offensive line is the one place that everyone kind of agree that they have the potential to upgrade this offseason. And I think you look at those 2 teams, the Chiefs and the Eagles, I think that's probably the biggest commonality between the 2 of them, is those are probably the 2 best offensive lines in the NFL right now.
Well, let's talk about the Senior Bowl a little bit more. I know you were there. We had Washington State linebacker Dayan Henley on our show a couple weeks back. I fell in love with this kid after watching him a little bit in the Senior Bowl and then checking back on some of his Wazoo and Nevada tape. What are just some general takeaways, Alan? Obviously, Steelers specific.
Yeah, it's not a the Senior Bowl group did not have a Steelers first round pick there, but I thought there were a lot of guys that fit their needs that make a lot of sense, starting with 32 and kind of going forward. Or Henley's one of them. There was actually a bunch of those inside linebackers DeMarvion Overshone from Texas, Ivan Pace from Cincinnati, Cam Jones from Indiana, that really stood out to me. A couple corners, wide receivers, so places where they have needs. Defensive line, I thought Brooks from Bowling Green and Benton from Wisconsin were both very good. Zach Pickens from South Carolina. So I think the draft has set up where I don't know what the Steelers are going to get at 17. They have a lot of different options, but I think the depth is good at a lot of the positions that they may or may not take. Like a lot of the offensive line was really, really deep. So, like, on one hand, I think it'd be really nice for the Steelers to go out there and just draft the second best tackle at 17. But if for whatever reason that doesn't happen, I thought there were lots of other options that showed themselves this week that kind of no matter what direction they go early, I think they'll have good options late. I don't feel like they should feel forced to make a specific pick, at least as things sit here right now. Now, if they start filling those needs in free agency, they can sort of box themselves in between now and then. If they sign a linebacker, sign a D tackle, sign a corner, now it's like, oh, okay, well now it needs to be offensive line because everything else is taken care of.
Hey, 2 Pickens are better than 1, right? That's the old saying. Before I kick it over to Jordan, I want to talk to you about free agency. I've been reading a lot of Pittsburgh beat writers, some others around the team, not specific to you, mentioning how this Steelers team, I think we're all pretty aware, hasn't courted the big time, right, free agents. And my response to that has kind of been, when you have $30 million tied up in a quarterback for 18 years, I think that makes that very challenging. I think obviously now you said they can create some cap space. Do you think they target, a big time? I mean, Edmonds, right? As Tremaine has been thrown out there a lot. I've heard names like Marcus Peters. Is that something you think is plausible, or do they stick to this Steelers way, as everybody likes to say?
I think it's possible depending on what they decide to do with their own guys. Like, are they going to bring, Larry Ogunjobi back? Like, okay, like if they do that, then they're probably not going to go make some other splash. Are they going to bring Cam Sutton back? Well, that's probably $10 million. So, like, if not, then okay, then maybe somewhere else, right? I think that's the other reason that the Steelers have not been big players in free agency, is that they've always had so many of their own guys that they wanted to keep, that they wanted to spend money on, that they didn't, there's so much of free agency there, you just don't know. Like, there's so much money gets wasted in free agency where teams pick up players and, they didn't know the personality, or it wasn't a good fit, or the guy wasn't as healthy as they thought he was going to be. And it ends up being this boondoggle, and you always know your own players best. And so if you're signing your own players, you're getting a better deal than signing somebody else's most of the time, because you know exactly what you're getting for what you're paying for. So if they go out, they re-sign, let's say they re-sign Spillane and Edmonds and Sutton and Ogunjobi, like, I don't see any more money for a big splash at that point. But if they're not able to bring some of those guys back, or maybe they choose to say, hey, look, this inside linebackers class is really deep. Let's just keep Miles Jack and Mark Robinson and roll the dice and see what we can get. Or maybe they'll do the same thing they did with D tackle last year and see if they can go into the later part of the summer and pick a guy up later on. Same thing they did with Terrell Edmonds last year. Like, if they wait, then maybe they can make one of these big moves like you're talking about, like a Tremaine Edmonds, like a Javon Hargrave, actually, I think is a really good fit for them. I think it's possible, but I think what they do with their own guys probably will determine whether they have the availability to make a move like that.
Yeah, so my next question is a complete 360. I just kind of wanted to get your opinion. Can the Steelers win a Super Bowl with Kenny Pickett? Just your personal opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it does not take Patrick Mahomes to win a Super Bowl. It might take Patrick Mahomes to win to have your team be in contention year in and year out. I think you're looking at, if you're the Steelers with Kenny Pickett, you're probably more like the Rams than the Chiefs, right? Like, if you put everything together, you can do it. Does that mean you're going to be great the next year? No. Does anybody think what happened to the Rams is going to happen to the Chiefs, where they're just going to fall apart next year? Absolutely not, because they got number 15. And that, to me, that's the thing. It's like, yes, you can win. It just makes it more difficult, and it makes the ability to sustain greatness year in and year out more difficult if you don't have an elite quarterback. And I don't want to sit here and say Kenny Pickett can't be an elite quarterback, but he certainly isn't one right now. And it's, probably less likely than not that he becomes one.
Wouldn't it be interesting if they followed the Rams mantra, just said F them picks and, next 5 years.
I'm not going to do that. But they can kind of do that in their own way, right? Where if they, let's say, they can do it with the salary cap in the draft, right? Where they can just be like, no, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to sign all those guys, and we're going to sign Edmonds, and we're going to push $20 million into the future and say, okay, we got this quarterback on a rookie deal. Let's spend all this money now, and then we'll they're not going to trade first round picks left, right, and center to build a team like the Rams did, but they can do that same thing where they put together a really good team that they know won't last for a long time, just to make a concerted effort at making a Super Bowl run. And certainly while Kenny is on a rookie contract, would be an attractive time to want to do something like that.
Most definitely. How should the backup QB situation be addressed? What is your take on that?
I would try to move on from Mitch Trubisky. I just think it's a lot of money for a guy that you don't want to play. Obviously, they need some type of competent backup. Kenny missed time twice last season, but I don't. I just he's $11 million. That's a lot of money. You can fill that position more cheaply than that. I also don't get the sense that Mitch is super thrilled about staying here to be Kenny's backup.
Yeah.
He came to Pittsburgh because he wanted a real shot to be a starting quarterback. Yeah, did he really get that? I don't know. He played 3.5 games, not that well. He was better as a backup later in the year. I mean, people are talking about Baker Mayfield as still being a starting quarterback. Why wouldn't Mitch Trubisky be in that conversation if he was made available? So, I mean, I would try to move on from him. See if you can find a veteran backup that is happy to be a backup.
What about bringing back Josh Dobbs?
I mean, Josh Dobbs is probably not a guy that you'd be super comfortable turning the offense over to on a lengthier stay. But I just think find a guy that's been there and done that and is comfortable being a backup that can be a mentor for Kenny Pickett. One of the things that I think is one of the biggest weaknesses of Matt Canada when you just look at his resume is that he has not had success at the NFL level, right? He's doing this for the first time here in Pittsburgh. Having a quarterback that has had that success somewhere else that can sort of look back on his career and say, oh, well, this is how we did it when we won here, I think would actually be a bigger benefit to the Steelers than having a slightly better quarterback like Trubisky. If he has to play more than 5 games, well, what's the hope of the season anyway? I think if you were able to get a been there, done that backup quarterback, I think that would actually be an Andy Dalton, maybe. Okay. To me, that would be a guy that would actually be a bigger asset to their offense and probably cost less. And then I would not be totally surprised if they draft a quarterback. They only have 7 picks, so they probably should not waste one. But do you really want to spend money on a third quarterback that you're really hoping never plays? I don't know. Go find Kenny's Dobbs, right? Josh Dobbs was was Ben Roethlisberger's kind of backup confidant guy he trusted and wanted around. Go get one of those for Kenny too that you can take with a 7th round pick or even undrafted maybe. But to have around, and I wouldn't be totally surprised if they add a young guy to the room as well.
Mike.
There's got to be a rocket scientist out there somewhere available. No, have you done a mock draft yet?
I mean, I'm not. No, I haven't. I did one. We did one with just guys from the Senior Bowl, just as a sort of fun exercise as to where we thought, some of those guys might finish. But no, I haven't done a real mock draft now.
That's all it is right now, is a fun exercise, because who the heck knows until free agency. For me, it's just killing time at this point. Hey, we're talking with Alan Saunders here on the Sick Podcast, Steelers Crazy. Check out our bottom line, of course. Follow us on Twitter at SickPodSteelers. And, of course, go follow Alan as well. We'll talk about that a little bit after the show. Tell everybody once again where to find you. I want to get into something that maybe has been overlooked a tiny bit. I mean, obviously, there's been so much talk about the Steelers retaining Matt Canada, but they lose Brian Flores. What kind of impact do you think that'll have moving forward?
I think you really saw Brian Flores' impact on the defense when things started to go sideways at times, and they were able to come up with some creative ways to sort of scheme their way out of some problems. They were able, they didn't have like a super impactful defense when TJ Watt went out, but they were able to kind of keep things mostly together. Like it wasn't like they completely fell apart. They ran something like 26 different defensive fronts this season. We saw just a ton of creativity in the way they deployed guys like DeMarvin Leal, who didn't really fit their sort of traditional paradigm for what they use defensive linemen for. They just found ways to use them. I think the defense got a lot more creative with Brian Flores around. Now, obviously, there were some other changes that happened at the same time, right? Terrell Austin became defensive coordinator for the first time. I also think you saw Mike Tomlin with a little bit less of his finger on the scale for the defense this year. He was a lot more involved in the offense than he has been in years past with a rookie quarterback. It's understandable. So I think you just saw like some more creativity, some more diversity of that defense. Will they be able to continue that without Brian Flores? I don't know. I just think it's an opportunity. It's always an opportunity anytime you can bring in a really good coach to add new ideas and new perspectives to your group. The Steelers are an organization that really values consistency, and they're not going to run guys off if they have a bad year, but then I think you also run into the danger of like just doing the same thing over and over again and not bringing in new ideas. And what I thought what really helped them was that they were able to sort of merge the concepts of consistency with innovation, right? Where they have a guy that is, Terrell Austin, he was a new defensive coordinator, but had been on the team for years. The whole rest of the defensive staff pretty much stayed the same for the last 2 seasons, but then you still brought in a guy that could add some new ideas to that group. And I think that's a fine line to walk, and I think that they've really shown that they can do that on defense. If they're going to replace Brian Flores, I'd be trying to replace him on offense. I'd be like, just like I was talking about Andy Dalton, I'd be trying to find somebody that wants that job, that wants to be a coordinator, that doesn't, Byron Leftwich, for example, would be an interesting, if he doesn't get another coordinator job, bring him in. Tell us what we did with Tom Brady when we won the Super Bowl. Let's see if we can do that. Like that to me, I think is a bigger need than on defense right now.
I know Jordan and I were talking off air a little bit. Anytime we have a Pittsburgh or a Yinzer on, we like to branch out a little bit and talk about some other sports teams. I know there's one that Jordan has a special place in his heart for.
Yeah, so I know you're a Pitt basketball guy. I'm just looking at this the rankings, man. I see Florida Atlantic's 25. I personally think it's a good thing that we're not ranked, because I think that it gives us that chip on our shoulder, because I feel like as soon as Pitt gets ranked, that's when they lose a game. I know that's how football has been in the past, and I'm happy that Jeff Capel got it together. Just kind of wanted to get your take on there before we get you out, and you can go enjoy your Valentine's Day. I know you probably have dinner plans or something.
I actually don't have dinner plans, but I'll figure something out on the fly here. No, it's very interesting. I've actually been thinking about this a lot. And so in college football, the poll is dumb, right? Like the poll is just like the old is the same as it's always been, right? Guys looking at the record and they compare the records and the resumes, and that there's no science behind it, right? Like there are sort of metrics in college football and guys like the Massey and Jeff Sagarin that sort of those formulas that used to be part of the BCS that were sort of using math to evaluate these teams within consistent schedules. Like that's been a thing in football for a long time, but the poll basically completely ignores it. Like nobody pays any attention to who's number 10 or number 5 or number 50 in the Sagarin ratings. Like they just go fill out their poll the way they always have. It's so funny because in basketball, like we've gone the total opposite direction now, where like I think Ken Pom and the NET formula have become so ingrained in basketball culture that literally like most of the poll voters are just looking at Ken Pom and running off 1 through 25, and then that's theirs. And like there's nothing wrong with that, but to me, like if I want to know who the computer formula thinks is best, I will just go look at the computer formula. The whole point of the AP poll is to add like the human element of like, what do the teams look like? How are they playing right now compared to how they were playing before? Who's injured? Who's good matchups against other talented teams? Like what? And I just think we're missing that part of it. And like, of course, like Ken Pom is treating, Pitt beating, the last 5 teams, just the same as they were Pitt losing to Michigan and West Virginia and VCU early in the season. And the polls are not supposed to be like that. They're supposed to be emotive and reactive, like they are in football. Like, in football, if you go 9-1, but you lose your last game, you suck. But if you go 9-1 when you lost your first game, you're awesome. And it's stupid. It's non-scientific and it's nonsense. And I talk all over and over about how dumb the college football poll is. And like, I think the basketball poll could be a little dumber. Like, I think it could bring, let's get a little bit more of the human part of it back. Otherwise, what value does it have? If it's just going to recite the top 25 from KenPom and from NET, well, I'll just read the rankings. Like, I don't need a poll to tell me that. I want more of hey man, Pitt won 5 in a row. Like, they're feeling good. Vote for them. I don't know. That's supposed to be the point of the exercise. And so it's very interesting to me how those two sort of very similar or supposedly the same properties have handled the way they incorporate analytics completely opposite directions. Just could not be more divergent. But as often as I say the college football polls are really dumb, I'm maybe appreciating them a little bit more now in basketball season, just seeing what it looks like when everyone just mocks what the analytics say.
Yeah. Love that. I'm glad we could include it. If there's a table in front of you, you are pounding it. You are pounding it. Alan, what do you got coming up? Where can people find you?
All the Steelers stuff, SteelersNow.com. We're going deep into the offseason. I'll be at the Combine. I'll be at Pro Days. I'll be at the league meetings. And, really think this is the time of year where, you really dive deep into the process and try to get to the bottom of what the Steelers are thinking, what the Steelers are doing. Also, Pittsburgh Sports Now, we got all kinds of stuff going on. Literally, one of the busiest times of year for us with all the conference tournaments coming up, and we cover, not just men's basketball, women's basketball, and wrestling, and some hockey, and all of the different stuff. The start of the spring sports season, so we got our baseball teams starting up there as well. WPIAL basketball playoffs are starting this week. So just a whole bunch of stuff going on over at PSN and the West Virginia and Penn State sites as part of our college network as well. So I'm staying real busy this off season, but it's all stuff I enjoy, and I'm really looking forward to what we've got going on.
Yeah, you probably don't remember. I used to cover the Pitt wrestling, and I sat right next to you. This was probably 4 years ago, but that's probably the last time
I've not covered that many Pitt wrestling duels, so I probably remember being there. But hey, they're pretty good this year too. They got a real chance to win the ACC. We actually just booked our travel. Don Campbell is going to be in Raleigh for us at the ACC tournament, so it should be interesting.
It's awesome. Hell to Pitt. We
Alan, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much. Great stuff, and take it easy on me on Twitter.
No, I go hard on Twitter. Nobody gets a pass from me.
Good.
Sorry, that's about it.
Any other way.
All right, man. Thanks
Later,
for your
man.
time. We appreciate it. Yeah, man.
All right, Jordan, always good stuff. Appreciate having a guy like Alan Saunders on. No question about it. Before we leave, I also want to mention something that's exciting and very important stuff. Tell you what, you asked for it and they listen. Sammy, we're going to tell you what's coming up. Roll this banner.
It's time for Sick Picks, brought to you by MyBookie.
MyBookie has designed a unique deposit bonus that lets you cash in and cash out quick. Very unique for sports bettors who want to focus on what to bet and not a payout sweat. Do us a favor. Make your first deposit today. Use promo code SICKPICKS, okay? If you're watching us on YouTube, it's not difficult to spell, SICKPICKS. Tell you what, if you want a sports book that gives you the most for your money, bet on big games with MyBookie. Just because the Super Bowl is over doesn't mean your bets should end. We got NBA in full swing, NHL in full swing.
Baseball, man.
Madness. You can bet on spring training.
Come on,
you can, which is absolutely crazy. You got all kind of great stuff. You can bet anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. Promo code SICKPICKS. I always give out a sick pick. I've been wrong for like 2 weeks in a row, so I'm gonna jump back next week on my sick picks. Or you bet the opposite of me. All right, fade me, as they say in the betting world. Let me pull something up really quickly. All right, we got Pens at Sharks tonight. I'll go Sharks. So go ahead, bet on the hometown team, the Penguins, right there. Cold, hard lock, Jordan.
Yeah, man. I mean, my bookie, like I said, I picked the Super Bowl, so I'm riding high off that. I don't know if I want to put in another bet after that because they might be all losers, but I got that one right. So I'm just gonna. At least I got the end the NFL betting season on a high note.
You're a prime example that my bookie works. All right, guys. Great show today. Appreciate having Alan on once more. Check us out, of course. Subscribe to the YouTube. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, your favorite streaming platform. As I always say, tell a friend to tell a friend. For Jordan York, I'm Mike Nicastro, and Ello and Sammy back in the studio. Thanks, guys.
Stay great.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.